Hello and welcome to another edition of the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with Real-Time Fantasy Sports, joined by Logan Glaser, as always, on the show. Logan, thanks for coming on and helping everybody break down Week 14 of the fantasy football season.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Logan, like I said, it's Week 14 already, kind of crazy. It's about over with the regular season for most leagues. Some of the bigger contests, playoffs have started, but for the most part, if you're in your standard leagues, it's either the last or second last week. So it's a really crucial week of games this week.
Yeah, absolutely. You're either fighting for that playoff spot, you're fighting for bye, playoff positioning. So lots on the line. I would say the majority of our leagues on RT Sports do have playoffs start in week 15. All American will start in week 16. And then TFC playoffs are starting this week for individual leagues along with RTFFC. So lots to follow there. And then we'll have the overall championships start next week for TFC.
Yeah, those big contests are a lot of fun to keep track of in the playoffs. We have a great leaderboard. You can watch your team go up and down and see how you're doing. They're great contests. If you've never gotten in them before and you're thinking about doing it, I'd suggest checking them out. I'll put out a link maybe on my Twitter feed at Jeff Powers. So you can take a look at how that plays out. But they're great contests, especially at this time of year, right, Logan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you just sneak a team or two into that TFC, there's just so much to play for. You have $500,000 up for first place. So if you can sneak a team into the playoffs, those final 3 weeks of 15, 16, and 17 are very fun to watch. So try to get in on that on the week 14. Sneak in to that overall championship and you can win a
Yeah, and if
lot.
you think you keep track of your team closely when the playoffs are going around in your standard league, wait till you get in a TFC and you make the
Oh yeah.
playoffs. I mean, you're
Oh yeah.
analyzing
It goes from
every decision.
maybe a couple $100 to 500,000 on the line. So
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of fun. So, like I said, if you haven't been in one of those contests before, I'd highly suggest doing it. Go to rtsports.com, click on that Money League link. You can see everything we have to offer on there. So, Logan, it's week 14. Like I said, every team is playing except two this week. Last week we had, was it 6 or 8 teams? I can't
we had
remember.
6 teams on a
6
bye
teams
last
on a
week, but it
bye.
was a good 6 teams.
It was. This week, the two teams on a bye are not good. Commanders and Cardinals. I mean, Trey McBride, Kyler Murray, Brian Robinson's banged up, but
Yeah,
there's a
James
couple
Conner. Yeah,
decent players.
there's a couple players there, but nothing that's gonna make or break your roster with them being on a bye.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully you can make up for those teams off this week. Logan and I are going to preview every game on the slate, and we're also going to give you our under the radar plays this week. So we're going to talk about players maybe you're not thinking about starting, because again, it's the time of year where I always say play your studs, go with the guys who got you there. So if you have elite players on your roster, maybe they've struggled the last week or two, but I'm going with them over marginal starts against who have better matchups. But these are guys maybe you might need to play because of injury or some other circumstance. So we're going to try to give you players that you might not be thinking about starting. But as always, like I say, at this time of year, I always say go with your studs. I don't know about you, Logan.
Yep, I'm the kind of the exact same way. Games on the line or seasons on the line, you wanna
Yeah.
have your best players in there, regardless of matchup. If you have a guy that's kind of iffy or you're debating between the 2, I think that's when you factor in the matchup, with that. But we have had a lot of injuries in these last
Yep.
couple of weeks, so there are a lot of holes to fill if you have players like Jonathan Taylor that have gone down. We've had a lot of QBs go down, that are banged up and out for the entire season, so lots of holes to still fill in some positions.
Last week was a train wreck with injuries. Christian Kirk, Trevor Lawrence, Tank Dell. There was
Yep.
several big name players that went down that's going to cause some holes. So it's another reason you might need to play some of these
Yep,
more
and then that's
marginal
where
players.
people slide up,
Yep.
like, so
All right, Logan, let's get into it. As always, we are happy to answer any questions you might have. We usually get a lot of them throughout the stream. We will get to them as the stream is going on. We won't do them, immediately when we get the question, but we will get to them in between our game previews. More than happy to answer anything you might have. Start, sit, trade. Some leagues still allow trading at this point. Whatever. If you have a question, Logan and I are happy to answer it and hopefully help you win your game this week. So let's get into the games now, Logan. First one, game of the week, Patriots 2-10 at the Steelers 7-5. It's 30 is the over under. Holy cow. That's
Yeah.
the over-under for the game. Steelers -6, even with Mitchell Trubisky starting. Uh, I mean, Steelers win, right? They have to.
Yeah, you would think so. I think Patriots are right there for the worst team in the league so far
Yeah.
with that. So I'm going to go with Pittsburgh, even though Trubisky is starting. They're at home. I do like them to cover. I don't think they're going to absolutely blow out the Patriots, but I think they win maybe between that 7 and 10 point range. If I had to guess that, and the over under that is so tricky with these two teams because that total is so low, but these two offenses just cannot move the ball. And you also have,
I'm still going under, I think. I
yeah,
really am. I really
I
am.
wouldn't fault you for that. And also, Stevenson is out for the
Yep.
Patriots.
Another
So
big
you got
loss.
Zeke Elliott as the lead back there. So even more reason to go with the under.
Who's your under the radar play in this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Devontae Parker for the Patriots as my under the radar play. Demario Douglas is out. They really don't have many options at wide receiver. Kendrick Bourne also was out for the season with that. So Devontae Parker steps up into that wide receiver one role. Last week he had 9 targets, 4 receptions, 64 yards, and he's going to get some volume. So I got him as my under the radar.
So mine is actually a defense. I'm going to say the Patriots defense. Mitchell Trubisky starting. He has some turnover issues. Patriots defense actually has been really good lately. They've allowed 10 or fewer points 3 straight games. They still can't win, but they've allowed 10 or fewer points 3 straight games. That's a great number. Held the Chargers to just 6 points last week. I think they're a great streaming defense in this matchup. I think they'll do well again this week. So that's my under the radar play here. Looking for a streaming defense. I'd go get the Patriots and use them here. All right, next game, Buccaneers 5-7 at the Falcons 6-6. This actually has playoff implications on the line for the division winner. Falcons are -1, so they're at home. Usually, home is kind of -3 is the standard. So I guess Vegas thinks the Buccaneers might actually even be favored here.
Yeah, that would imply neutral field Bucks would be the
Exactly,
favored.
and it's
Um,
40 for the over/under.
Yeah, this is a huge game for both of these teams for that division. The Saints have kind of been falling out of it with that, and Panthers are already out of it. So winner of this game is going to be in control of this division. I think I do like Atlanta, though, just at home. I think they get it done at home. If it was at Tampa Bay, I think I would be going with Tampa Bay, but just the fact that they get the home game with that. My play on this, and he's more of a kind of a stud, but I would still consider him as an iffy player, and that would be Drake London. So
I
when you
agree.
look at his stats so far, I think there's only 4 games so far in the season where I would look at his production and say, I want him in my starting lineup so far. He's only scored more than 14 points 4 times on the year. But last week he had just kind of a throwout game. He had bad weather, but I think they really will try to get him more involved after only having 1 reception last week.
I agree with you when you say he's not a plug and play at this point, London. I think he's more of a matchup option, and I don't think he's your every week starter. So I like that for under the radar play. Mine's the same way. I have Kyle Pitts. He led the Falcons in receiving last week. I know it's not saying much. He had 4 catches for 51 yards, but that's kind of encouraging to me. The Bucs do struggle against the tight end. They allow the 12th most fantasy points to tight ends. They're good against the run still. Bijan, Tyler Algier. I think they could get shut down in this matchup. Bucs, if you're going to get them, it's through the air. And earlier this season, Pitts had 3 catches, 47 yards on 5 targets against the Bucs in Week 7. So those aren't great numbers, but not bad. And I think if they're going to win this game, and I do think they win this one at home, that's the only reason I'm picking them. But Falcons, one of those teams that I have no faith in when I pick them. I have no idea what they're going to do from week to week, just all over the map. I guess it's mainly because of the QB situation. Ritter's not very good. You just never know what you're going to get from them. But I'll say the Falcons win at home. I'll go with the over, though. 40 is pretty low for the over-under there in that one. All right, let's do our first question, Logan. Bench one in a 0.5 PPR. You going to bench Swift, Jalen Warren, D-Hop, or Calvin Ridley?
So I think Swift is a must start this week. They really emphasizing this past week that they want to run the ball more with the Eagles, and that is a very high. It has the highest over under on the board, 52. So I think Swift does find the end zone this week. So he's absolutely a must start for me. I think it comes down to DeAndre Hopkins or Ridley for me to bench on this. I do think there's a lot of weather concerns in that Jacksonville game. The over/under is currently 30 on that game at Cleveland. They're supposed to get hit with some rain, so that's something to keep in mind. It's going to be a lot harder to pass the ball with that. So if that is the case, I would probably bench Ridley. If the weather starts to clear up and looks better, then I would probably bench DeAndre Hopkins going against Miami. So I think weather would depend on that.
Logan, I totally agree with you. That's my call as well. I think if the weather's an issue, I'm benching Ridley. If it's not, I'm probably going with him, even though I don't like the matchup, and CJ Beathard might have to start. But I just think his ceiling's higher than D Hop. I know D Hop had 12 targets last week, which is encouraging. They could be playing from behind, have to throw the ball a lot, but still, he has 60 or fewer yards 4 of 5 games. So he has not been great this year, and Ridley's had some monster games along the way. So I'm with you. If the weather's an issue at all, I'm going to bench Ridley, just not taking a chance because they're similar plays.
Yeah.
So, like you said, with the matchups with these marginal guys, something could shift you one way or the other, and I think weather could be the issue here. So, keep an eye on those weather reports and make a decision based on that. I agree with you, Logan. All right, next game, Logan, on the slate. Rams 6-6, playing some better football at the Ravens 9-3. Let's see, the over/under on this one is 40, so low scoring game, -7.5 for the Ravens, a pretty big number. I actually think
this is
the Rams
another
might
one of those
cover.
games that could be affected by weather, which is kind of why it's lower with these two offenses. But I do like Baltimore in this game. I just think they're the toe-for-toe better team
Yeah.
than the Rams for this. So I do like them to cover that 7 points. I also am going to go with over because they get it done on the ground. Baltimore, for the most part, their rushing attack, along with Lamar, has just been so dominant so far this year. Guy I'm going to be looking at is Keaton Mitchell. If you look at his yards per carry, it's just insane. Yeah. So he has 15.3, 11.3, 4.1, and 7.1 yards per carry so far in the game, which has just been insane.
Yep.
Putting up that last week, he had 9 carries, 64 yards, 2 receptions, 25 yards. I think he's almost, you got to plug him into your flexing lineups. We did just get a question if you'd go Keaton Mitchell or Swift at flex. I would still go Swift over Keaton Mitchell, but I'm fine starting Keaton Mitchell as a flex option.
Yeah, I like Keaton Mitchell a lot this week as well. I think he's trending the right way, getting more playing time. I know Edwards still gets the goal line carries, but they're finally utilizing him more. I mean, Edwards just is kind of more of a slow plotting back. And
yep, they're two different pace backs,
yeah.
But Edwards does great within that 5-yard line, which is why you almost have to start him because he's looking at a touchdown or 2 each week.
Yep, I agree there. And I agree with you too. I probably would still go with Swift. I just think the ceiling's much higher, more touches. I know he was disappointing last week. Tough matchup as well. And probably the best matchup of the week in that game we'll talk about later, but I agree there. All right. In my opinion, I actually think the Rams might cover this. 7.5 is a pretty big number. I like the way they're playing. I think the Ravens are a better team. I think they win, but I could see them winning by maybe 7. I like the over also. I actually am going with a receiver in Baltimore, and that's Zay Flowers. I think the injury to Mark Andrews helps Flowers more than anyone. He just gets more looks because of that. He had a season high 23.2 fantasy points his last time out. He has double-digit fantasy points 2 of 3 games, 13 catches during that stretch as well. Rams middle of the pack against the pass. So I think Flowers has some success here, and I feel good about using him in this matchup. All right, next game, Lions 9-3 at the Bears 4-8. This game is 43 for the over/under, plus 3.5 for the Bears at home. Didn't the Bears upset the Lions last time? Is that right?
They should have. So they blew a 10-point lead in the
Oh
final.
yeah, you're right. Okay, that's it. You're right. You're right.
So Bears should have won that game. But it was classical Bears in the final few minutes. So Montgomery did score in the final, I believe, 30 seconds to win that game for them.
That's right. What's your thoughts on this game? Plus 3.5. Not a huge number. Lions playing pretty good football. Bears at home. 43 is not super high for the over under. What are you
Yeah,
thinking?
Bears have looked a lot better with Fields coming back from
Yeah.
his injury. They upset Minnesota last week at Minnesota, or 2 weeks ago. They had a bye last week with that. But yeah, that line is tight. But I think I'm going to go with Chicago to
Okay.
cover that line. So that's who I'm going to go with. I do think I'm going to go with the over. I think Detroit's defense just hasn't been that great so far. Bears' offense is moving the ball better. Detroit still has a great offense, even though Goff has struggled with turnovers. So I feel more comfortable going with the over 42 on that pick. Um, so I'm going to go with that. So as I mentioned, Goff has struggled with turnovers, but they still push the ball down to their wide receivers and got two elite running backs.
Yep, definitely. I agree with you. I think the Bears might cover this. I could see it being a 3-point game, good game, but I'm going the over also. I think the Lions win, Bears cover. Should be a good game, though. I'm kind of looking forward to this with Fields being at home there. Who's your under the radar play for this matchup?
Yeah, so he's back on the radar for everyone, and that's DJ Moore. So the 4 games without Fields, he went 10, 13, 9, and 6 for fantasy points and just really struggled without Justin Fields. But now that Fields is back, he's his go-to target, and they are looking much better. So I think Moore is a must-start in all leagues with that. He's gotten back-to-back 22-point games. So I'm plugging in Moore in every single one of my lineups.
So I actually like Rashawn Johnson this week. He had double-digit carries his last time out. It was his first time that he got that much work all season. He also had 5 catches in the game, giving him 15 total touches. I know Dante Foreman's likely back to get a bigger workload this week, but I think Johnson's a more talented back at this point. And this point of the season, when you're out of it, you want to see what you have going forward. I think that the Bears give Johnson more looks. I think he could be a sneaky flex play. Also, the Lions. They've been better against the run lately, but just a few weeks back in that Bears game that we've been mentioning, 183 rushing yards for the Bears in that matchup. So they ran all over them. So I like them to focus on running again in this game. And I like Johnson as maybe a flex play for fantasy teams. All right, Colts 7-5 at the Bengals 6-6. Bengals starting to play some good football. Jake Browning at QB looked great last week. This should be a really good game. 44 for the over/under, -1 for the Bengals at home. If Joe Burrow's there, that line's a lot different, most likely. But Browning's playing better, and I think that this line's probably moved recently because of that. So, you think the Bengals get it done at home?
Yeah, this is a massive game for the wild card. I do think the Bengals get this done. Just Browning looked so good last week against Jacksonville,
He
and
did.
Indianapolis has really struggled at defense. I would say they're pretty similar to Jacksonville against the pass. With that, Browning went 32 for 37, 354 yards, passing touchdown, rushing touchdown, 30 fantasy points, as we talked about earlier. So I do like Browning this week, and I do like the Bengals to cover. That's actually my under the radar play
Okay.
and Browning this week. So I really like him, and I think lots of points will be scored.
Yeah, I had Browning on my sleeper list last week. Easy for me to say. Worked out well. I actually used him in a league also. I didn't expect him to do what he did. He was phenomenal, but man, they game planned him great, that coaching staff. They really had great plays drawn up for him, and he just looked a lot more comfortable in that second start. So it's really encouraging for me for that team going forward. They could end up making a push for the playoffs there, I think, because they're talented enough to do it at receiver, running back, defense has been a little underwhelming in my opinion, but they still have some talent on that side of the ball. I like the Bengals at home in this matchup, kind of like you do as well. And I'm going over for the over under 44. I don't like either of these defenses very much, so I'll go over for that. And my play is the other QB. That's Gardner Minshew. I thought he had his best game of the season last week. He had his third 300-yard passing game of the season, threw for 312 yards and 2 touchdowns without an interception. It was his second game this season with 20-plus fantasy points, so he has some potential there for sure. And he had more chances with Jonathan Taylor out. They kind of struggled. I know Zach Moss had played well early in the season when he was starting, but he didn't look quite as good this last game with Taylor out of the lineup. So I think Minshew could be called on a little more to throw. And the Bengals, they allow the 6th most fantasy points to QBs. So I think that Minshew could be a good play here as well. So we like both QBs as our under the radar plays. Another question here, Logan. We have James Cook or Brandon Cooks in the flex PPR. So we got two Cooks.
Yeah.
Which Cook you going with?
So both have great matchups this week. I believe it's the two highest over-unders on that. You got Buffalo at Kansas City with that rematch of a massive playoff game 2 years
Yep.
ago. And then you also got Philadelphia at Dallas. So two very high-scoring games, but I think I'm going to go with James Cook. I just think he has a safer floor. He's guaranteed to get his touches. Cook kind of relies on that touchdown and kind of that long ball. So I'm going to go with the safer route and James Cook with that.
I do like Brandon Cooks a lot this week. I think he's a decent play, but if I'm doing a flex and a PPR, I'm going with the running back like Cooks. He's just so safe, like you said. His floor is really good, in my opinion. Brandon Cooks may have the higher ceiling, more capable of the big game, but James Cook has at least 13 fantasy points, 3 straight games. That's really consistent. He gets a lot of touches, around 20 per game. He has at least 3 catches, 3 or 4 games as well. So I'm going with him. I just think he's safer. And also earlier this season against Philadelphia, I know Cooks has been really good lately, but Brandon Cooks had just 1 catch for 7 yards against the Eagles in week 9. I don't think their pass defense is very good in Philadelphia, and they're using Cooks better, but still, I just think James Cook is the way to go here. I think he's a much safer play. So good luck to you in your game there. Excellent 1906. All right, next game, Logan. Jags 8-4 at the Browns 7-5. Browns haven't really named a starter at QB yet. I would think they'd go with Joe Flacco, but nothing is set in stone just yet. But the Jags could be two backup QBs going against each other here. CJ Beathard. I know they haven't ruled out Trevor Lawrence yet, but man, it didn't look good. I can't see him playing this week. So I
Yeah,
think
I
it's going
think
to
you
be
have to be cautious
yeah.
about
And
it.
this over unders 30.5, another super low scoring game, -3 for the Browns at home. This is a tough game, in my opinion. What are you going?
It is. I do think Joe Flacco will get the start. Because he wasn't bad for
No,
the Browns last week against the Rams. I mean, they put up 19 points with that. So I think they'll gladly take 19 points this week with that. So I do think I'm going to go with the Browns because I'm assuming Trevor Lawrence is going to miss this. Also, you got Christian Kirk out, just struggling with injuries. Defense has not been great for Jacksonville. So I'm going to go with the Browns overall in this game. And I'm going to go with Elijah Moore as my under the radar play. It does kind of sound like Amari Cooper is going to miss this game as well. So both teams going to be without a top wide receiver with that concussion. But Moore just had so many targets last week against the Rams with Joe Flacco. He had 12 targets. He only had 4 receptions, though, so that was the concern. But we do just have a question that came in. Would you go Elijah Moore over Deontay and Downs? I don't know if I would just because of the weather in this game. That just scares me so much with that over under being so low. I think it's going to be hard for the passing game to get going. So I think I might go Downs over there.
that's a really close call
It
for me.
is. It's
I
a tough
probably
one
would
play.
I would lean Downs as well. Deontay Johnson, I have no faith in that passing game at all with Mitchell Trubisky there. I mean, Johnson's just really been not very good. Under double digit points 3 or 4 games. So I just think his floor is fine. He'll get 3 or 4 catches, but I don't think he's very exciting. I think Downs or uh, uh, Elijah Moore is the way to go. I might lean more, but it's a close call. I think it's either Moore or Downs, in my opinion. I'm probably leaning more just a little bit, but I think you can make a case for Downs for sure, Logan. So I'm okay with that as well. All right, my opinion of the game, I'll go with the Browns at home to win. I don't know what to expect from CJ Beathard. He hasn't shown
Yeah.
much, in my opinion. So I'll go with the team with the better defense, and I think the Browns have a better defense. I actually had Elijah Moore as my under the radar play, but I'll pivot and say defenses. Either one is a good play, in my opinion. You're normally playing the Browns here because they have a good defense, have produced well, and they're getting a backup QB. But I like the Jags, too, going against Joe Flacco, who likes to take chances. He'll throw the ball down the field. If it's 3rd and long and nobody's open, he just fires it up 20 yards down the field. We've seen it. and he doesn't seem to care if he makes a mistake. He likes to show off that arm and take chances. So I think the Jags defense could be a good play in this matchup, in my opinion. All right, a couple more questions came in as well. We had JSN or Godwin this week. So Jackson Smith Najigba or Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin scored last week, didn't catch a pass.
Yeah.
JSN, on the other hand, had 11 targets, which was a season high. He gets San Francisco. Godwin gets Atlanta. What are you doing here?
So I think I'm going to go JSN just because, I mean, JSN had 11 targets last week. And then, as you mentioned, Godwin didn't catch a pass last week. So JSN is actually leading that offense in targets. He might not lead in yards because they're more kind of just short out slants with that. But I think I'm going to go with JSN and get that for sure production. I just saw this morning about Godwin's wife took to Twitter calling out the coaching staff and not getting him the ball enough.
Oh, I didn't
So
see that. That's
yeah,
not
so that's
good.
another thing going on with that. There's a little bit of drama
Oh
with
no.
that. So I'm gonna go with JSN out of those
Yeah.
two.
So Godwin scored a touchdown last week, didn't even hit 8 fantasy points. That's kind of crazy. He has 5 straight games with fewer than double-digit fantasy points. I I mean, you think they'd want to try to get him involved and try to make him happy because he's one of their star players. So I could see them maybe making an effort to do that. But I think Smith Najigba might have the higher ceiling, so I might lean him. It's a tough call, though. I think they're very similar plays. So good luck to you there, Ryan Volt. But Logan and I both say maybe JSN here, but it's a bit of a toss up. So good luck in figuring that one out. All right, next game we have the Panthers 1-11 at the Saints 5-7. Two teams trending the wrong way. Over unders 37.5. I actually thought it might be lower considering some of these over unders we've seen. Saints are -5.5 at home. It looks like Jameis Winston's probably going to start. Derek Carr actually got in a limited practice yesterday, but the report was it would be shocking to see him start. So Winston probably starts here in this matchup. What do you think happens here?
Yeah, so I actually might really like this over because he's got two QBs that are going to throw lots of interceptions and set up the other teams in great field
Defensive score.
positions.
There you go.
So when you get those two QBs, it's actually could be a good over on that. My play is going to actually be Jameis Winston just because of he's going to put up lots of touchdowns, but he's also going to throw lots of interceptions, get the ball right back, which is, I actually looked up his stats in 2019, his last year on the Bucs. He was the QB3 on the fantasy season. He had
Yep.
40 more points than Patrick Mahomes. It was just crazy to look back at those stats. Just 4 years ago, he was the number 3 overall quarterback. He hasn't really had a good starting chance since then going to the Saints, maybe his first year with that. But now with Carr there, he's definitely the number 2 option with that. But again, he's going to put up, it's going to kind of be a boomer bust guy. He can put up 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he'll also have 4 interceptions, which don't hurt you terribly in fantasy.
Yeah.
So I like him as my play.
For sure. I'm going with the Saints at home here. Panthers just aren't very good. I say they cover. I'll go with the under, but it'll be close. It's not a confident under selection here. And with the Panthers, I actually kind of like Chuba Hubbard here. Hubbard had 20 plus fantasy. He has 20 plus fantasy points each of his last 2 games. His first 100-yard rushing game of the season last week. He did that again against a good Bucs rush defense. He isn't a sure thing in this offense, but he gets a Saints team that's beat up at linebacker. They're having some issues stopping the run because of that. Saints have allowed 140 plus rushing yards 4 or 5 games. So I think Hubbard's a good number 2 fantasy back in week 14, in my opinion. So I'm rolling with him in this matchup. All right, next game, Logan. Texans 7-5 at the Jets 4-8. Zach Wilson returns to the starting lineup for the Jets, even though it seemed he was reluctant to do that. He's back in there. Over under another high scoring affair, 33. Jets are home dogs plus 3.5, but not a huge number there. I like the Texans to cover that for sure, personally, but I might go with the under with the points, even though it's 33. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is another game that's probably, they say that it might be the most affected game by weather. So
Okay.
this is another one that could be a very ugly weather game. There's a lot this week on the East Coast. So if that's hurting the passing game, I think both teams are going towards running. And Houston has really struggled with running, but so has the Jets. I mean, Brees Hall is average less than a yard or right around 1 yard per rush last week. So Dalvin Cook actually led that back. So it's a toss up again. I do think I'm going to go with Houston just because they have more to play for. They've got that wild card spot on the line where Jets are kind of just free falling.
Yep.
But player I'm going to be looking at is Damian Pierce. Again, as I mentioned, with the weather concern, and he kind of regained that lead back over Singletary. Last week, he had 15 carries and a touchdown. Didn't look great, but they trusted him enough to get him more carries than Singletary, which his job was kind of up in the air for a while.
So I agree. I think the Texans win at home. I think they cover that number. I'm going with the under. And you stole my guy too, Damian Pierce. So obviously we don't consult ahead of time who we're picking, but we kind of like going in like this. I think it makes the show more interesting for sure
Yeah.
when we don't know who we're picking. But I like Pierce as well because of the factors you mentioned. He actually got the crucial carries later in that game, the goal line work as well. Uh, Jets are 29th overall against the rush. So if you're going to beat them, it's on the ground, in my opinion. I could see them making a focus to run the ball, even though Stroud's had a lot of success. They're without Tank Dell, though, so that's a concern as well for that passing game. Schultz is back this week, though. Dalton Schultz, it looks like, so that should be a help there. But I think they're going to run the ball and have success, and I like Damian Pierce as a flex play in that matchup. All right, another question on here, Logan. Rocky Adams asks, who would you go with in a flex between Rashee Rice, Hubbard, or Garrett Wilson? That's tough.
Yeah, it is. I think for me, it's between Rasheed Rice and Chuba Hubbard. I think I am fading Garrett Wilson. He just hasn't been great the last 2 weeks. But Rasheed Rice, I think I'm gonna go with him. He's just been dominant, and he's really emerged as that Chiefs' #1 wide receiver in the past 2 weeks. He has 18 plus fantasy points the last 2 weeks, and he has a great matchup this week with an over/under of 48.5 at home against Buffalo. So I'm gonna go with Rice.
Yeah, it's a close. I think it's between Rice and Wilson as well, in my opinion. I mean, Rice and Hubbard. I just don't like Wilson, even though the matchup isn't terrible. But I have no faith in that passing game. I just think he has the lowest floor of the two. I think Hubbard's the safe play of the options, but Rice has the higher ceiling. So it depends on what you're looking for here. I mean, if you need to win and have a big score to make the playoffs, I might go with Rice, but if you want to play it safe, get that, 15 or so points or 12 to 15 points, I think Hubbard's the guy I go with. So that's the way I might lean Hubbard personally. I think he has the better floor, but Rice has a higher ceiling. So I think you can definitely make a case to go with him. Good luck to you in that decision, Rocky. All right, next game, Logan. Vikings 6-6 at the Raiders 5-7. This could be a crucial game for the Vikings if they want to make the playoffs. They get Justin Jefferson back this week. Should be good for that offense. The over-under in this game is 40.5, not super high, and the Raiders are +3 at home. What do you think happens?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Minnesota just because Justin Jefferson's back. It will be interesting to see how he mixes with Dobbs, and that offense kind of gels back together. They had a really bad week 2 weeks ago, and then
Yep.
they had a bye last week, but they've had a lot of time to work on that. But player I'm gonna be looking at is Alexander Madison. He had 18 carries,
That's
81
three in a
yards.
row, Logan. It's 3 in a row.
What can I
No, go ahead.
say? Great minds. Last week he had 10 carries, 52 yards, great yards per carry. So I like him as my under the radar.
Yeah, I like the Vikings to win on the road. I think this could be a close game, though. It just depends on what Dobbs shows up. I do like that they're starting him. I think he gives them the best chance. Personally, I know they kind of have some good expectations for Hall in that offense, but I think Dobbs is the safer of those options. It just depends which one shows up, but I'll say the Vikings win. I'll go with the over though. And like I mentioned, I like Madison a lot just because of that QB position. It's a little bit of a concern with Dobbs and all those turnovers this last game. Madison has at least 16 carries, 3 of 5 games. If he gets that much work against the Raiders, they allow the 6th most fantasy points to running backs. I think he could do some damage in that matchup. All right, we got a few more questions rolling in, Logan, here. Brandon Cooks or Calvin Ridley? Didn't we have a similar
Yeah, we've
question?
had both of those guys just mentioned with other
That's
players
right. You're right.
with that, but it's a tough one. Again, I think a lot will depend on that weather for that Cleveland Jags game. For me, I think if the weather's fine with that, I would go Ridley. But if the weather's shaky, then you can go with Cooks and a dome with a highest over under. So
Yeah.
that's hard to fade. But then again, Ridley is going to be that clear number one wide receiver for Jacksonville.
Yeah, the concern for me with Ridley is even when Kirk went out last week, he had 8 targets. He had just 4 catches for 26 yards. So it's not like
Yeah.
he lit it up, and it wasn't a great Bengals secondary. Now he gets the Browns. So I actually might lean Cooks even without the weather situation in for that Cleveland Jacksonville game. So I might just go with Cooks. He might have a higher ceiling at this point, 16 plus fantasy points, 3-4 games. It's a close call, but I'm probably leaning Cooks here. Good luck there, Uncle Ted, in week 14. Okay, next game. Seahawks 6-6 at the 49ers 9-3. This is a big game for the Seahawks if they want to make the playoffs. I can't see them winning on the road against San Francisco there. They're rolling. Looked great last week against Philadelphia. Over under for this game is 46.5, minus 10.5 for the 49ers. I think that's the biggest. Yeah, that's a bit. No, it is not the biggest line. There's one more game with a bigger line than that, but minus 10.5. It's a big number. You think the Seahawks can cover that at all?
I still think I'm going to go with San Francisco. They just look so dominant. That offense, it's just unstoppable. There's just so
Yep.
many different weapons that they have. These two teams played a couple weeks ago. San Francisco blew out Seattle at Seattle. With that, it did take a little bit of time for them to pull out with that game, but I am going to go with JSN as my under the radar play. I mentioned kind of before.
You got
You have him as well.
I do. Maybe we should get together before.
But yeah, I mean, he's leading that offense in targets. The last week, he had 11 targets, 7 receptions, 62 yards versus Dallas. So I got him again this week.
Yeah, I'll say the 49ers cover that, even though it's a big number. I'll go with the over. The Seahawks offense looked better last week. I was encouraged by Geno Smith, kind of trying to prove the doubters wrong. People saying the previous season was a fluke. So I think it will be a high scoring game and the 49ers win. But like I said, I like JSN too. Playing from behind, throw often. I think the secondary options usually do better when you play these better defenses too. I know the 49ers have struggled against the pass, but still, uh, I think the secondary options can do better as they try to shut down DK and Tyler Lockett. And the 49ers also allow the 8th most fantasy points to receivers. All right, let's do another game, Logan. Bills 6-6 at the Chiefs 8-4. Marquee matchup here. Two of the perennial favorites for the Super Bowl for the season. Bills have disappointed this year, but the Chiefs are only minus 1.5 at home. Over under is 48.5. So a little surprised that number might not be, at least minus 3.
Yeah,
But
I'll let you go first with this game.
yeah, this is a tough one. I'll say the Chiefs at home cover. Not confident though, but I'll go with the under for the over under. I think both these defenses have played pretty well, while the offenses have struggled more than I thought they would. And I will say for my play, you're playing all your good players, and this one should be a high scoring game, even though I think it's under 48.5 still. It could be 45, 46 points. So that's still a good number. So I like all the options. So I'm looking at more secondary guys here. And one of those guys is Clear Shakir with the Buffalo Bills. Played a season high 80% of the snaps his last game. High scoring game. Like I said, playmakers are going to be involved. Shakir's a playmaker. He has at least 3 receptions, 5 of 6 games, 2 games this season with 15 plus fantasy points. So I think he could be a good play here. What about you?
Yeah, my play I'm going to go with is Gabe Davis. With that, and he's the true definition of a boomer bust play. His targets in the
True.
last 5 go 12, 2, 6, 0, and 12. So you're either going to get 20 plus fantasy points out of him, or you're going to get under 5. And he loves playing against Kansas City, as we saw 2 years ago with that playoff game. And he's had some good games against Kansas City recently. So I like Gabe Davis in this.
All right, another question, Logan. Who would you pick in a half PPR, Warren or Dillon?
I'm going to go with Warren. I think Warren just is more explosive out of that backfield. Think it's still up in the air if Aaron Jones is going to be playing or not this week. And if Aaron Jones is playing, then it's very hard to start Dillon. So I'm going to go with the safer option with Jalen Warren.
Yeah, I know Warren didn't have a ton of touches last week, which was disappointing. I think we all thought he would have a really good game against Arizona. Seemed like a great matchup, but Najee Harris is banged up, and looks like he's going to be a game time decision. And Warren still, even though they didn't have a lot of carries last week, 9 carries, 59 yards. So he got it done with his chances. And I still am not sold on A.J. Dillon. I know he's played better lately, but still, his numbers are not very explosive. His season high is 13.6 for fantasy points. And that was in week 5. And he gets 17, 18 touches a game. So I just don't think his ceiling's super high. I would lean Warren as well in this matchup. All right, let's do another question here. Highly considering starting Dobbs over Justin Herbert because he's playing for his job and has a favorable matchup against the Raiders while Herbert has struggled the last 2 weeks. Would you start Dobbs over Herbert?
For me personally, I think I'm still going with Herbert. They've got a home game against Denver. I think that's going to be a high-scoring game. And we still have to see kind of how Dobbs mixes with Justin Jefferson. But Dobbs really struggled in a start 2 weeks ago. He had 4 interceptions. So I know a couple of them weren't his fault. But I think I still have to go with the more talented Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I can't do it. I understand the thinking. You're desperate. You need to play well, but could put more pressure on you too. And the Chargers have struggled lately. Less than 18 fantasy points, 2 straight games for Herbert, which is not like him, but played Baltimore and New England. Those are 2 pretty good pass defenses. Denver has been a little more leaky than those teams. So I think Herbert rebounds this week. I look for him to have a much better week. I can't bench him for Dobbs. I hate to say it. Sorry. All right. Next game, Logan. We're going to do that Broncos Chargers game now. So Broncos 6-6 at the Chargers 5-7. Over under for this one, Broncos 44 is the over under. Chargers favored by 3. So standard favored at home here. I like the Chargers personally to win and cover this. And that line is like right on it, in my opinion. I might go the over, but it's a close call. What about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I think I would feel more comfortable with going the over. I think both defenses haven't been great so far with that. And you also got Bosa injured for the Chargers with that. Guy I'm going to be looking at is Quentin Johnston. Chargers have just really struggled with the run game so far, and with Eckler and Josh Kelly both struggling. So I think they really just turned to that passing game. Quentin Johnson hasn't been great. There's been a lot of drop balls that he's had, but he had 5 receptions, 52 yards on 7 targets last week, and that was at New England in that 6-0 game. And this should be a much high scoring.
It might be his last week to show his stuff too, because I think Josh Palmer's nearing a return.
Yes, when Palmer comes back, then Johnson's is non-existent.
He's going to need to show his stuff this week if he wants to keep getting targets in that offense for sure. So like I mentioned, I like the Chargers at home. I'll go with the over, and I like a different pass catcher, and that's Gerald Everett. So he isn't having quite the season many hoped he would, but he isn't doing bad. He has 4 receptions each of his last 2 games. He has 3 games with double-digit fantasy points this year. Denver's been awful against the tight end. They allow the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends. Chargers, again, haven't been getting great production outside of Keenan Allen, so someone has to step up. You like Johnston. I'll go with Everett in this matchup because of the history against the tight end that Denver has this year. All right, let's do another question. Someone mentioned about KC allows the most yards to running backs this year. It's a great point there. Excellent. So something to keep in mind when you're making those starts against them. Someone needs Mahomes to finally have a huge game this week. That would definitely be nice. He has definitely underperformed. Could happen this week, though, in what could be a shootout. Next question, though, is drop the Cowboys D or clear Herbert for Josh Kelly after this Eckler news. What is the Eckler news? What did I miss?
So the Eckler news is that they might get Josh Kelly more involved just because Eckler
Okay.
hasn't been great. so far. But when you look at Josh Kelly's stats, he's kind of the exact same way,
Yeah.
which there is some news about that, but they both have really struggled. If you look at Josh Kelly's last 4 or 5 games, all of his yards per carry are under 3, and that's unlimited touches. And even when Eckler missed games, Josh Kelly didn't perform
No.
great. He was just right around there, maybe around 10 fantasy points, but he didn't blow open any doors where when Eckler is on, he can have 20 plus fantasy points. So I'm definitely keeping Cowboys D just because I think they're the best defense from a fantasy perspective. I know they've got some tough matchups coming up, but still, it's hard to sit Cowboys defense with how explosive they
Pick
can be.
six Bland. Pick six Bland. You can't
Yeah,
sit that defense because that's crazy. He's carried teams this year.
they sure have.
I just don't. I think Kelly and Herbert's similar. So I mean, if you really want to take a chance on Kelly, I'm okay with it, but I think it's just kind of a toss up. I don't think either of them are going to make a big impact the rest of the way. Personally, I might sit tight with Herbert just because of his pass catching ability, and Kelly's not really a great pass catcher. So uh, I don't think I'm just not. The Kelly news isn't moving the needle for me, unfortunately. All right, next game, which is likely the best one of the week in my opinion. Eagles 10-2 at the Cowboys 9-3. Should be a great game. The over-under for this is 52, minus 3.5 for the Cowboys. So the Cowboys actually favored a little more than that normal -3 at home. 52 is a huge number, though. 52.5, or 52, I'm sorry. Huge number. They go over that?
I almost lean towards yes. I
Yeah.
think both of these offenses are some of the best offenses in the league. Mentioned Eagles have just really struggled at defense. They got carved up by 49ers last week. I do like Dallas in this game just with them being at home. Eagles are struggling a little bit. Hurts isn't fully healthy, as mentioned with that. Guy I'm going to be looking at is Jake Ferguson. He had a great week last week, 6 receptions, 77 yards. He had a touchdown versus Seattle, and this is going to be a high scoring game. So I'm starting a lot of players um, in this game that you have.
I'm going to talk about a player that we've mentioned several times throughout this stream already. But before I get to that, I guess I'll say the over two. That's a huge number, but I could see this being, 33-30, something along those lines. I like the Cowboys at home too, with the Eagles kind of struggling a little bit. I think they have a lot to prove Dallas this week. This is kind of one of those, put up or shut up games. They beat up on a lot of the bad teams this year, but if they can beat a
Yeah.
good team at home, get back into that chance to win the division as well, I think it'll mean a lot for them. So I think it's a huge, huge opportunity for them. And I guess I'll lean with them. I don't have complete faith in them, though, based on their track record. And the guy I like is Brandon Cooks. So he didn't top 50 yards last week, but he found the end zone once again. He has scores two straight in 3 or 4 games, 16 plus fantasy points, 3 or 4 games as well. Like you mentioned, high scoring game. He didn't do much in his first matchup against Philadelphia this year, but I think this offense is just playing different than at that stage of the game. And Philadelphia also has really struggled against the pass. They allow the most fantasy points to receivers, ranked 29th overall against the pass. All right, let's do another question, Logan. We have a Madison versus Rashee Rice. This is another, it's kind of like that Hubbard Rice one. It's a close call with
Yeah.
these two.
It's a close call. I think I am still leaning towards Rice in this, just because that I do think that Buffalo Kansas City game is poised to be a shootout as well. With that, and Rice has been great the last 2 weeks. Madison has kind of been right around that 10 fantasy point the last couple of weeks with that. Madison has looked better, especially with Cam Akers out of the picture with that. But I am going to go with Rice.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I like Hubbard better than Madison, so that's why I leaned that way in that other question. But I think Rice has a higher ceiling than Madison, although I mentioned that I liked Madison this week. Both of us did. But still, overall, his numbers have been pretty ho-hum. I kind of wish he got more catches in the passing game. He has more than 2 catches just a handful of times all season, and he has 2 or fewer catches 6 straight games. So he doesn't get a ton of work in the passing game, which doesn't help his floor. Gets the carries, but I think Rashee Rice has more potential to boom. Normally, I lean the running back when it comes to flex plays, but I'm going with Rice here. He's just been getting a lot of looks and looking really good. So The next game, Logan, we have 2 Monday night games this week. I don't know why they're doing this, but they're doing it for some reason, because people will watch. That's why, I guess. But 2 Monday night games. First one's Tennessee Titans 4-8 at the Miami Dolphins 9-3, 46.5. So big number. Dolphins, this is the biggest line of the week, minus 13.5 for Miami there at home on Monday night. Any chance that the Titans cover?
I don't think so. I think Miami just beats up on bad teams, and this Tennessee is a
True.
bad team. Um, with that, my play is going to be Tajay Spears. I think Derrick Henry's slowly going to move out of that offense, just to kind of save his health, kind of moving forward. So I think they're basically out of the playoff picture after losing to the Colts last week in overtime. So I think they're just slowly going to start fading him out, moving Spears in, and seeing what he can do with a full workload. Last week he had 16 carries, 75 yards, 4 receptions, 13 yards versus the Colts. So I like him as my play.
I'm going to say the Titans cover. I think the Dolphins win, but maybe by 13 or 10. But I say the Dolphins don't cover that minus 13.5. And I'll go with the under as well, although I think the Dolphins will score some points. And I say game script matters. And the game script for me is Titans playing from behind, having to throw the ball. So that means Will Levis could be intriguing for me this week. I think he's shown some flashes of good things, 2 multiple touchdown games. He takes care of the football too. I thought interceptions and forcing the ball was going to be a problem for him. He has just 2 interceptions all season, so he's done well there. I think he can make some big plays against his secondary, playing from behind. Dolphins also middle of the pack against the pass. So I think Levis could be a sneaky play here if you're looking for a quarterback fill in for some reason because of injury. Maybe you have Trevor Lawrence, something along those lines. All right, last game, Logan. Got through them all. Been a lot of fun today on the show, getting a lot of great questions, getting through all the games. We're stepping on each other a little bit because we pick a lot of similar players, but overall, really good show so far. Before we get to this last game, thanks everybody for coming on and joining us as always. But this last game doesn't seem too exciting. Packers 6-6 at the Giants 4-8, 36 the over/under. Another really low over/under total, plus 6.5 for the Giants. So Packers really favored despite being on the road here. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with the Packers. Jordan Love has just looked phenomenal,
He has.
which I did not see that coming out of him in the first couple of weeks, even last year with that. He has 4 straight games with 21 or more fantasy points, 10 touchdowns in 4 games, and he's my under the radar play in this matchup. I'd feel comfortable starting him, and there's a lot of QBs that went down recently. Like say you have a Trevor Lawrence who's questionable this week and might not play. I feel perfectly fine starting Jordan Love this week. You mentioned 4 straight games, 21 or more fantasy points, and that is a good consistent fantasy quarterback with that. Where like Mahomes has kind of struggled the past couple of weeks. So
Yep. He's played better than Mahomes fantasy-wise lately, and I actually have Love ranked 8th overall this week. Like you said, he's been phenomenal. And last week it was against Kansas City. That's one of the best pass defenses in football. They've shut everybody down. So Love has turned the corner. I think he's a real deal. He's not my under the radar play. It's actually Dontavian Wicks. So Christian Watson's hurt, probably not going to play. I think someone has to step up. And Wicks has been getting more involved lately. At least 3 receptions, 4 straight games. He's been targeted at least 4 times, 5 straight games as well. So with Watson out, someone has to step up. I think he could be a good number 3 fantasy receiver this week if you're looking for an option. He's been good in the red zone as well. So I like him, and I like the Packers also. I didn't mention that, to win on the road. I'll say they cover that. That'll be close, though. Plus 6.5. Giants defense isn't terrible, but that offense, Tommy DeVito's looked better, but still, I don't have faith in it at all. I hate to say it. So I'll go with the under also for that number, 36.5. So say the Packers cover under as well. All right, Logan. That's our week 14 preview. A lot of fun today. A lot of great questions, too.
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all the questions, everyone. Lots of good matchups this week. There's a couple iffy matchups, but we got
Yeah,
several good games on the slate.
for sure. I hope everybody has a lot of success here in week 14. Like we mentioned earlier, crucial week of games. It's either the last week of the regular season, second last week, or maybe even your playoffs are starting. But either way, it's a crucial week. So I hope everybody has a ton of success. And as always, don't forget to go to rtsports.com. Check out everything we have to offer on there. We have baseball leagues drafting now. We have DFS Pick'em, all different sports. We have our not our DFS games and our Pick'em games, I should say. It's separate. So you can do all sorts of things if you want to get involved in other things besides your fantasy teams right now, right, Logan?
Absolutely. And we also have playoff leagues starting up to draft.
Yep.
So playoff best ball just started up this week.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun. We have different contests too we're running. Maybe we'll do some giveaways here in the coming weeks for those. We did that earlier in the year with some of our big contests, but we have a couple really big playoff contests. It should be a lot of fun this season, and I hope everybody gets involved. Again, go to rtsports.com and check it all out. All right, Logan, thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it. Fun show today, and good luck to everybody out there in Week 14. This has been Jeff Paur with Real Time Fantasy Sports. Have a great day.